Thought I'd take a few minutes to talk about some of the cars I've owned over the years. I'll warn you in advance that there are a lot of ordinary cars here, nothing too exciting, but a lot of Mopars. So my very first car was a 1975 Dart. It was a two-door hardtop, it was a slant six auto, nothing too exciting. It was a couple of different colors, but it was decent on gas. It ran okay and it drove straight. It was good enough for a first car. My second car was a little more interesting to me. It was a 1973 Monaco. That was also a two-door hardtop. It had a 360. It was a great car for cruising. I've always liked hidden headlight cars, so I really liked the front end of this car. It was also a twin to a car that my friend in high school had. His family owned the identical car. I really, really liked it. I loved the car, but at the time I just couldn't afford the gas, so I ended up selling it. Although I bought it back once again and then sold it again for the same reason. And I went back to a Dart, a 74 Dart this time, with a slant 6 but a 3-speed manual. This one had decent paint. It had a nice stiff suspension, so kind of had my own little autocrosser. That one eventually had to replace the clutch, but I didn't resurface the flywheel at the time, so that kind of never shifted properly after that. And then the shifter locked up, and I thought it was just time to move on. And that led to my unfortunate next purchase, which was a 72 Satellite, four-door, green. That was a slant 6 too, and it only ran the 5 cylinders. It was such a dog. It did not last long. Matter of fact, until I was looking over my pictures, I forgot I had even owned the thing. That led to my next purchase, which was a 71 Satellite. This was a B5 blue, my favorite color, and it was a 318. It ran pretty good, but man, was that car rusty. One of the purchases I made in the time that I owned these two particular satellites was a 64 Polaris two-door hardtop. That could be considered my first project car. It didn't run, had no brakes. Had a transplanted 318 LA engine, no poly in this one. It was an automatic car. Somebody has cut a hole in the floor and put a shifter in there, right in the floor. They had the delete plate for the push button, so it sort of looked okay, but nothing fancy. That one I kind of took out to my grandfather's farm, and I never really did do anything with it, and eventually sold it. So when I had my 71 Satellite, I started looking for a clean body to maybe something that looked a little better than this car, and I found this 73 Coronet. It didn't run, but the body looked pretty decent. So what I ended up doing was swapping the motor from the 71 Satellite into this 73 Coronet. And I did it right in that parking spot that you can see there. That's not something you can do today. That car I eventually sold to my brother. After that, I had a 75 Grand Fury with a 360. And I drove that one for a little while. But it turns out it had a leak in the transmission, and I didn't notice it until the trans started slipping. So that was the end of that one. Which led me back to another 73 Monaco. I found this one. It was a little bit of an upscale one compared to my last one. The silver with the blue interior looked pretty sharp. I like the car. I've always liked those cars. So I drove that one until a dump truck decided to pull a U-turn in front of me, and that one ended up going to the scrapyard. My next memorable car after that was my 68 Valiant. That one had a rebuilt 273, not a lot of rust, like hardly any at all. It was gold with a green interior. The only thing about it that was maybe annoying was it must have been in an accident at some point because the driver's door at the top just never sealed properly. I had tried adjusting the door and just couldn't seem to get it to line up right. But that car was one of my favorites. It had a lot of power. It must have had 355 gears because that little 273 moved up pretty quickly for what it was. So I'd say that my top three cars were my 73 Monaco, the brown one. I love driving that car. I love the hidden headlights. The car was actually pretty unique because you never saw many of those around. Not at that point, and certainly not now. My second favorite would have been my 64 Polaris. Even though I never really drove it, I love the styling and it definitely made an impression on me. And third would be my 68 Valiant. That car was a lot of fun to drive. So that's it for this video. This part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 where I talk about some of the more recent purchases that I've made. All the Mopars that I've had. Thanks for watching.